All right, what's going on? What's going on? I hope everybody's doing okay. Welcome to Creative Real Estate with Cash Money, Mike. I appreciate you joining me. Hopefully, we get some viewers on here because I'm a little late, but that's okay. Some of you are going to get this on the replay, and some of you are not. Let me go ahead and grab the chat. If there's anybody on here that wants to throw something in the chat, go ahead and just throw it in there so that I know that you can hear me and that you can see me. This episode of Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike is brought to you by the Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike Facebook group. If you'd like to join over I think we're right at about 1,200 people inside the Facebook group. You can go ahead and just scan the QR code over here on my right. You can go ahead and get into the Facebook group. All right, so what I want to talk to you about today, I want to talk to you a little bit about underwriting a seller finance deal. Been doing a lot of work with a lot of students from across the country. And if you follow me on Instagram or you follow me on any of the social media platforms, you can see all of the success that they are having. A bunch of single family deals, a bunch of multifamily deals, which is amazing. Starting to build some long-term generational wealth. But, the scariest part about seller finance is always, how you get into pitching seller finance, some of the things that you say, some of the things that you shouldn't say, how important are the things that you say, and how important are the things that you don't say. So ultimately, I think what winds up happening a lot of times with wholesalers is that because seller finance gives you the option to technically, overpay for a piece of property, that a wholesaler is going to want to use it as an option. So what they'll do is they'll present a few different options, or a few different offers, I should say, and then when those offers really don't work, what they'll do is they'll all of a sudden come up with another offer and try to use that to their advantage and say, hey, well, Mr. Seller, I know you weren't going to sell me the property at 50 cents on the dollar. Let me go ahead and actually make you a different offer. I've got a great idea. Why don't you be the bank for me? Give me the terms that I need. I'll pay you 6% interest, and then I'll balloon you out in 30 years. And if you pitch seller finance like that, you're going to find yourself pretty unsuccessful quickly. And usually one of the biggest compliments I get inside my training is that, thank you, Antonio. One of the biggest compliments I get inside my training is, Cash, you've got a really unique way of pitching seller finance. And I do. I have a very unique way, and it's actually not that complicated. What it is it's just this easy kind of crayon language ease about the way that I pitch deals. But more importantly, I know what I'm looking for before I go into the conversation. And I think that's so incredibly important. I've got a lot of students who bring me calls that, tend to go sideways out of the gate because I either want them to say something or I don't want them to say something. But, you know, you build real rapport inside a conversation by positioning yourself as the authority inside the conversation. And I've got a pretty unique way of doing that by getting on the same level as the seller who's looking to sell me the property. Easier said than done sometimes. But what I do with a lot of my students is I tell them not to talk money. I don't want you to talk money, and I don't want you to talk strategy. I want you to go and collect information from the seller. Let's bring it back to the underwriting table. And when we get it out on the underwriting table, we could lay all the pieces out and we could really pick apart the conversation and figure out what's going to make that seller move. Now, 90% of the time, 90% of the time, it's always going to be money. I mean, if you ask any seller in the country or on the globe, they're all going to tell you that they want the most money possible. And I think that's what's so intriguing to so many different investors is that, hey, well, if I can offer more money with seller finance, then let me learn that strategy. But it's much more than that, and it's understanding the acquisition strategy and then understanding the second part of that equation. And the second part of that equation is really the money game, or what I like to refer to as the money game. Now, growing up, I was always taught very different ways to think about money that I don't think were absolutely correct. For instance, when it came to tax, I don't think anybody likes the word tax, and people try to avoid it, at all costs. That was something that I was taught when I was growing up. I was taught not to take on any kind of debt, that it was bad to take on debt. And as I went through my real estate journey with ultimate failures, huge amounts of failures, I've also had a lot of successes, is that I finally realized, oh my God, I'm missing the money component inside my real estate investing, because it's one thing to lock up deals and put them under contract and put them into your portfolio. But if you don't use the real estate the right way, you're really leaving a lot of money on the table even after you lock up the deal. So the thing that I had learned over my career in real estate is that there is no tax on debt, and that I had to learn to fall in love with debt and fall in love with tax in order to truly understand the enormity of the money that could be generated inside of a real estate deal. All right, so let's talk about it with seller finance. So, in order to understand how to underwrite a seller finance deal, you're going to have to understand how a bank makes money. And you can walk into a bank tomorrow and think that you're going to be able to get whatever you feel like, because you're you, and you can walk in and say, hey, Mr. Bank, I want to be lent $1 million. The bank is going to say, well, hold on a minute now. Before we lend you anything, we want to make sure that you are who you say you are. We want to make sure that you have a job and that you're able to pay for this. And then we want to make sure that you're credit worthy. And what they do is they put you through a bunch of requirements that the bank has. And they say, hey, listen, if you want to borrow this money, show us that you have a job. And you prove to them that you have a job. And then they say, well, we don't really trust you, so show us your tax returns just to make sure that you really, really have a job. And then you show them tax returns. And they go, okay, just a couple of more things. Let me go ahead and run your credit and see if you are credit worthy. And depending on how credit worthy you are will determine what kind of an interest rate you get and what kind of a term you get. So let's break down those two. What is interest? Interest to a bank, and this is very important, interest to a bank is the fee that they charge you to lend you your own money. You go to the bank, you make a deposit into the bank can lend out a certain percentage over whatever you deposit. Let's say it's 10 times the amount of what you deposit. If you deposit $10, they can loan you out $100. If you deposit $50, they can loan you out $100. I don't know the exact percentage, but the interest is the fee that the bank charges you to lend you your own money. And that's just the way the system works. Everything is about finance. Your houses, your cars, sometimes your furniture, your appliances, everything revolves around finance. So if you really want to structure an incredible seller finance deal, what you're really going to need to understand is how interest works. And what happens is, after they check your credit and they determine that you are credit worthy enough for a certain amount of money, they then tell you how much money they're going to lend you. Again, you can't walk into a bank and say, hey, I want $1 million. They're going to say, you can't afford $1 million. We're only willing to lend you $500,000, whatever it may be. And after they go through all of their requirements. They'll let you know. And then if you are credit worthy enough, they will give you a good interest rate, and they will spread it out over a certain time period or a term. Now, when you're buying a piece of property as a primary residence, there's generally two products that the banks will own, or excuse me, offer you. They'll offer you a 15-year product, or they'll offer you a 30-year product. And if you've ever heard some of those rocket mortgage commercials, you'll hear, hey, pay off your house faster. Why don't you go ahead and refinance into this 15-year mortgage? You'll save a bunch of money in interest, and it's probably best that you do that. Now, if that was your primary, and you decided that you were not going to be an investor and that you wanted to pay your house off, I think that would be a smart move. As a matter of fact, when I was coming up, I thought by paying everything off was the smartest move. And then it hit me one time when I was in a note investing seminar that I said, oh my God, I've got it all wrong, because it's through the tax and through the debt that you truly get wealthy. Well, if I pay it off and I sell the property and I realize a gain, in other words, the difference between what I bought it and what I sold it for, I've got this really large tax called capital gains tax. And you only realize that tax when you actually sell the property. And I had no idea that through the debt or the refinancing of the property, that I could pull the same amount of money out of that property completely tax-free and never have to sell the property. So why wouldn't I want to do that? And through all my years of working with people, when working with real estate investors, it's really this mind shift from short term to long term, where so many of us are programmed to have the money inside our hand. And we fail to see the stuff that goes on the back end, like the principal and the interest and the timeline that ultimately adds a ton of value to your real estate portfolio. So now that we know that interest is the fee that the bank charges you for them to lend you your money, the next thing is the actual term of the loan, which again is 15 or 30 years. Now, if they lend you the money for 30 years, they're going to collect more interest, which is why you hear, again, Rocket Mortgage say, hey, if you get into a 15-year product, you could save the interest. So the bank wants to keep you inside the loan for as long as possible. Guess what, though? Even if you sold the property, the bank knows that the person who's coming behind you to buy the property is going to be using a loan 90% of the time. So the bank always wins. And if you think about a casino in Las Vegas, they say the house always wins. You shouldn't bet your money when you sit down at the blackjack table. Well, it's kind of the same premise when it comes to mortgages and banks, is that the bank always wins. Well, what if we could take all the money that the bank makes and we try to make it for ourselves? You go, well, Cash, how do you do that? Well, we just reverse engineer the process. So let's go through the process. The bank lends you the money, and they never lend you at 100% loan to value. They always leave that 20% cushion in there. And I always ask people, I go, why does the bank leave that cushion in there? And sometimes people have a hard time answering it. Well, here's the answer. The answer is because they're waiting for you to go bad. In other words, they're waiting for you to default, or if you default, they want to make sure there's enough equity in the property that they can take it back and sell it. Remember, the bank is not in the real estate game. The bank is in the lending game. So they leave a little bit of equity in there in case you go bad on the loan. Now, what if you don't go bad on the loan? And it's not like they're waiting for you to go bad. They're just protecting themselves from you going bad if you happen to go bad on the loan. And even if you didn't go bad on the loan and the market took a little bit of a downturn, they would still recover. So what they'll look for is they'll look for a certain percentage to allocate towards the market, maybe 10%, and then they'll take the other 10% and they'll allocate it towards you going bad. Hopefully, if you don't go bad, they can still take that 10% that they allocate for you potentially going bad and shift it over to the market. So the market could drop by 15, 16, 17%, and the bank is still going to be okay. And that's the reason why they only lend you at about 80% loan to value. If you looked at what happened in 2008, they were lending at 100% loan to value or 110% of loan to value, which is absolutely insane that they would lend money for future appreciation. And if the house doesn't appreciate and the market goes down, the loans collapse. So that's the reason why. Now, if we calculate all the interest that we would pay to a bank over a period of time, I've got this example inside my head that I'm going to spit out here. Let's say we had a $300,000 loan at a 6% interest rate, and that term was spread out for 30 years. We would spend $350,000 in interest alone. So that's $350,000, $300,000 in the loan or the purchase price. And again, this is 80% loan to value. And you're talking about paying $650,000 on this. Ultimately, if it's a $300,000 purchase, the actual purchase price was $360,000, right? Because 10% would be $30,000, 20% would be $60,000. If they only lend you $300,000, then the purchase price is $360,000. So you've put down $60,000 of your own money. There's now this loan for $300,000, and you're going to pay it. If you stayed in the loan for 30 years, you're going to spend $350,000 in interest. Take the $350,000 in interest, the $60,000 that you put down, and you're at $410,000. And then ultimately, that principal amount of $300,000 winds up getting paid down through the payments that you make. A certain portion of the payment is going to go to interest. A certain portion of the payment is going to go towards principal. And all in all, you will have spent you will have spent $710,000 for a $360,000 piece of property. Now, most people would say a house is an asset. And I would say you're an absolute fool if you believe that your house is an asset. Your house is only an asset if you decide to use it for your comfortability and you're not a real estate investor. In other words, you're going to wait for the value of the piece of property to go up in order to cash out, maybe 20 years or 30 years down the road. But here's the question, is that if I just spent $710,000 for a $360,000 piece of property, what kind of appreciation do I have to capture year over year in order to make up the difference between the 360 and the 710? And you're talking about a pretty heavy appreciation rate, right? So most people buy a piece of property, they use it for their own comfortability, and then they wait. And it's in that time frame that the value of the property goes up. So that's one way to make money in real estate. You could buy a piece of property and wait. Now with seller finance, there's 5 different ways to make money. And because you're not using it for comfortability, you're using it for your you're using it as a rental, you get something called cash flow. So, number 1 on the list is cash flow. Number 2 on the list is leverage. I'm going to wait on that for just a second. Number 3 on the list is going to be tax advantages. That's one of those hidden things that I just spoke about early on that most people do not calculate. There is so much money sitting inside the depreciation of the property. Number 4 is going to be the appreciation, which is exactly what a primary homeowner would get. And number 5 would be the principal pay down. So through a seller finance deal, if you can reverse engineer what a bank does, you could put together a deal that gives you all 5 of those things. Now, if you get 2 of those things, you're doing well. If you get 3 of those things, you're doing great. If you get 4 of those things, you're doing excellent. And if you get 5 of those things, you absolutely hit a home run. And 90% of the deals that we put together inside my communities are all 0% interest deals, which is going to give us it's going to give us an accelerated spread, meaning the spread between what I would have collected between waiting. If I had just bought the piece of property and waited for the market to take over, I'm going to gain so much equity. But if I gain so much equity and I'm paying down the property at the same time, my spread gets much, much larger faster. And that's exactly what we look to do inside a seller finance deal. Now, here are all the negotiables for you. Number 1 is going to be the purchase price. Number 2 is going to be the down payment. Number 3 is going to be the monthly payments. Number 4 is going to be the timeline at which you spread the payments out. And then number 4 and 5 are going to be the interest and the interest only. Now, there's a certain sequence that you should want to go ahead and actually negotiate those in so that you don't trap yourself when it comes to the down payment. Just like wholesale, when you go in to buy a piece of property, you technically don't have to have the money, right? All you need to have is a set of skills that you can deploy to try to lock the property up at a discount, find a buyer for more money, and never have the money to actually buy it. And I think why so many people struggle is because you feel like you don't have the money because you don't. And that's okay. So with seller finance, you can overpay for a piece of property, give them more than what they're asking, and guess what? You don't actually have to have the money. There's one piece of the negotiables that will determine how much money you come out of pocket for, and that's going to be the down payment. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to negotiate the down payment first. You want to negotiate the purchase price first. Then you want to move into the monthly payments. Then you want to move into the timeline. And then you want to use the down payment, the interest, or the interest only as the levers that you pull to put an amazing seller finance deal together. Now, I know this might sound confusing, but if we break it down, we're looking for 4 things. We're looking to understand the money that comes in, the money that goes out, and 2 timelines. That's all. It's as simple as that. But you have to have a mind shift where you can absolutely shift your mind to long-term, a long-term mindset, which is going to be um, amazing for you. All right. Tomorrow night, I'm having a live virtual event for those of you who are on here. Now, if you've been through my training, this is probably not for you. I don't know who's watching. So if you'd like access to the live virtual event tomorrow, you can go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen now. It is called Creative Real Estate Hacks. I'm going to show you a mistake that's costing you a bunch of money. I'm going to show you just how much money you're leaving on the table. I'm going to show you how to overpay for property. I'm going to show you how to eliminate your competition and structure deals that pay forever. So if you'd like to be involved tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, I've got a live virtual event. You can scan the code on my screen right now, and I'd be happy to have you inside the room. All right, listen, I want to thank you very much for joining me here on this live. I'm going to be doing more lives on here. I apologize for being a little bit late today. I know that I was supposed to start at 7 o'clock, but I got a little tied up with some other business, and I apologize. But I'd love to see you guys inside the room. Go ahead and scan the QR code, and we